This is a brief review of the book The Astral World, Its Scenes, Dwellers, and Phenomena, published in 1915 by William Walker Atkinson under the pseudonym Swami Panchadasi. In it, Atkinson tells us that the oldest occult teachings state that there are 7 planes of being. The lowest is the material plane, second is the plane of forces, third is the astral plane, and fourth is the mental plane. Above these 4 planes are 3 higher planes, which Atkinson says have no names, and that those inhabiting lower planes are not capable of comprehending, and for this reason he does not describe them in this work. Instead, he focuses upon the astral plane. Each of the 7 planes has subplanes, which are also further divided many times. It is erroneous to conceive of these planes as made up of matter or material substance. We must remember that even the densest forms of matter are composed of vibrations, and the forces of nature are manifestations of vibrations of energy. Therefore, we see why it is incorrect to think of planes as being layers of strata, one on top of the other. Instead of the planes rising above one another in the scale of fineness of matter, they are graded according to their respective degrees of vibration of energy. They are planes of vibrations of this energy, not planes of matter. In addition, these planes interpenetrate one another in the same point in space. A single point of space may have its manifestations of each and all of the 7 planes of being. In sum, a plane of being is not a place, it is a state of being. When it comes to the material plane, Atkinson explains, it is important to realize that there exist forms of matter that are much lower in vibration than even the densest forms known to us. There are also forms of matter that are much higher than those known to us, even though these may exist in other worlds. Next higher in the scale of manifested being is the plane of forces. Not a lot is known to us about this plane, but Atkinson says it is also divided into subplanes and further divided even after that. Here are found forces that are far below the scale of the ordinary forces of nature known to humans, as well as those which are far above. According to Atkinson, it is the forces far above that account for many of the wonders of occult science. In particular, he mentions the term prana, or vital force. Next above the plane of forces is found the astral plane. While some have spoken about regions within the astral plane, Atkinson says that this term has caused much misunderstanding, but because it has led to thinking of them in the sense of heavens and hells as definite places in space. However, these regions are vibrational manifestations on the astral plane and do not refer to any special place or space. Atkinson raises a familiar question that may have been asked regarding this plane. How is it possible for one to speak intelligently of the phenomena of the astral plane if that plane is on a higher vibratory scale than the physical senses? How can one visit and perceive things on this plane without his body being dematerialized? He answers this question this way. There are 2 avenues of approach to the astral plane, 1 by the employment of the astral senses, and 2 by visiting in the so-called astral body. This is how he describes the astral senses. Each of the physical senses of man has its astral counterpart, which functions on the astral plane just as the physical senses do on the material plane. These senses, however, are in a state of latency in most humans. They include the power of seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, and tasting on the astral plane. Sometimes these are awakened accidentally, but more often through careful training. Those who have developed this perception of astral vision, trained occultists, are able to shift from one set of senses to another by an act of will, whenever he or she wishes to do so. To vision astrally, the occultist merely has to shift his sensory mechanism. This is the simplest and most common way of occult sensing on the astral plane. The second avenue of approach to the astral plane is that in which the individual leaves the physical body and travels on the astral plane in his or her astral body. This body is composed of an ethereal substance of a very high degree of vibration. The astral body is an exact counterpart of the physical body. While it is not immortal and it finally disintegrates, it survives the physical body by a number of years. The advanced occultist in his astral body is able to leave the physical body while it is in a state of sleep or trance. It is able to visit the astral plane, though it remains connected to the physical body through a fine filament. If this filament is severed, death of the physical body will occur. Though many people are able to astral travel, usually they have no recollection of it upon waking. The advanced occultist, however, travels consciously and with a purpose and is wide awake upon the journey. Atkinson notes that the astral has its scenery, geography, and things just as has the material world. Its inhabitants are also just as real. The law of constant change operates on the astral just as on the physical plane. Between the astral plane and the physical plane, there is only a matter of difference in the rate of vibration of substance. The astral has laws just as has the material world, and these laws must be obeyed or consequences will result. One may travel from one region of the astral to another simply by an act of will, which raises the vibration of the astral body. It is not necessary to move to a point in space. Atkinson says that one may travel in the blink of an eye by merely wishing or willing to do so. If one has the knowledge and power, one may traverse all of the subplanes, witness their inhabitants and scenery, and then return to the material plane all in a moment of time, without changing a single point in space. Atkinson tells us that the lower subplanes of the astral contain some disturbing and unpleasant sights. If one travels to these domains, it is necessary to protect oneself with a positive mental attitude and a command to deny the inhabitants there any power to cause harm. It is necessary to change vibrations in order to visit this domain. On these subplanes, it appears that the material world is still all around you with its scenes plainly visible, but upon closer inspection, it is discovered that there's a peculiar veil between these scenes and the astral realm. This veil is semi-transparent while having the appearance of solidity. It acts as a barrier to keep astral entities from accessing the material plane. One very unpleasant subdivision of the lowest plane is what old occultists call the astral cemetery. Atkinson describes it as ghastly and depressing in nature. What appears there are the disintegrating forms of human beings and even some animals that seem to be floating in space. Though they are not physical bodies, they bear close resemblance to physical corpses. These disintegrating forms are what occultists know as astral shells. They are astral corpses, just as the physical body in the grave is a corpse. This is how Atkinson explains the process of the disembodied soul on its journey. The disembodied soul eventually leaves the astral and moves on to the mental or spiritual planes of being. This is synonymous with the heavens concepts that some religions teach about. When the soul passes on, it leaves behind it the astral body it has inhabited during its physical life, which then begins to disintegrate and in time disappears altogether, being resolved to its original elements. During this process, it dwells on this particular division of one of the lower subdivisions of the lowest astral plane. There is a great variation in how long it takes the astral shells of different individuals to disintegrate, and hence this process determines the length of time that shell will remain on this astral plane. The astral shell of a person who is highly spiritually evolved disintegrates very rapidly. On the other hand, the astral shell of a person of material ideals and earthly tendencies will hold together for a much longer time. These astral shells are dead and have no intelligence or consciousness. Souls with high ideals and spiritual aspirations contain no material thought vibrations which might tie them to the astral body after the soul has withdrawn. This is because its higher nature has neutralized these strong but lower vibrations. The soul that retains strong material attachments and desires, however, remain bound to the astral shell for a much longer period. If these lower mental vibrations are strong enough, they may create a semblance of life and activity which might be stimulated by means of a psychic stimulus from persons living on the material plane. This is how Atkinson explains the power of mediums and mediumistic circles to allow the spectral form to manifest itself. Atkinson explains that the supposed reactivated specter strives to manifest itself by speech, raps, or automatic writing. Though he admits that there are many other forms of spirit return, partial or complete, what passes for the real phenomena is really just a manifestation of spectral forms from the lower astral plane of which he writes. He says these entities borrow ideas and impressions from the minds of the mediums or the persons in the circle, in addition to their own shadowy memories. However, they have no souls because the soul that originally occupied the form has already departed to a higher plane. He comments that the true occultist occultist would never be deceived in this way. He does say, though, that nothing I have said must be taken as denying the reality and validity of what the Western world knows as spirit return. I am fully familiar with very many instances of the real return to earth life of disembodied souls. Many mediums are really clairvoyant and are able to unconsciously draw to some extent upon the astral records for their information regarding the past, instead of receiving the communication from a disembodied soul, in all honesty and in all good faith in many cases. Atkinson describes one region of the astral as strictly guarded and watched over by high spiritual influences. It is a sacred place and no visitors are permitted that are not of a very high spiritual nature and purity of heart. Here are great souls in a state of slumber, not dead, but merely sleeping. There is none of the atmosphere of death or corpses in this realm. There is a sense of infinite calm and peace. Great watchers of the sleeping souls, who are of a very high vibration, dwell here. The souls who slumber here eventually awaken, and then their forms disappear from the scene. They still exist, but their vibrations have changed and they move on to another great subplane. Here begins the real life after death. Atkinson says that the Roman Catholic Church and some sects of Buddhism speak of an intermediate state called purgatory. This purgatory is a place of the burning out of low desires, not the burning by material flames, but by the fire in the desire itself. The idea is that the low desires are burned away or purged. It can be seen on the astral plane that these views have somewhat of a basis in fact, though only a fragment of truth is contained in these stories. Atkinson says that all theological teachings regarding life after death, heavens and hells, contain some truth, but none contain all the truth. He describes the actual truth as follows. In the majority of cases, the mind of the dying person sinks into the slumber of so-called death and awakens only after a period of restful, transforming slumber upon the astral. In some cases, however, there is a brief awakening, like a semi-awakening from a dream, shortly after the departure from the physical body. In these cases, the astral body may appear visibly to a friend or loved one, but eventually the disembodied soul becomes drowsy and sinks into the preliminary sleep of the astral. The amount of time the disembodied soul slumbers differs greatly depending on its spiritual development. The highest and lowest souls awaken first. The average soul slumbers much longer than either of these. The soul that is highly spiritually developed has little transformation to undergo. It has work to do upon some higher astral plane. Particularly advanced souls may even skip the higher astral planes and pass on at once to the plane or planes above the astral, what occultists call the heavens, which are technically regions of the mental plane and even higher. The low soul awakens quickly and passes at once to the low plane for which it has an affinity, whereas the high soul awakens quickly because it has less to slough off and transform into higher attributes because the work has already been completed. The low soul is not destined for the high scenes. Rather, it descends to a low plane of the astral where it lives out its low inclinations and ideals until it is finally ready for further transformation. The average soul slumbers much longer because it requires a much greater transformation for its scenes of higher activities. All souls, however, eventually move off the astral and enter into the state of the mental plane or the regions of the heavens and leave their astral shells behind them. On these planes, the spiritual souls experience great bliss, though the lower souls spend less time there and scarcely taste it. What are the scenes of the astral actually like? Atkinson gives descriptions of them starting with the lowest subplane to those much higher. All depends on vibration. The lower the plane, the lower the vibration of the inhabitants found there. On the lowest subplane, he says the atmosphere is physically repulsive. On the earth plane, this would be akin to a place inhabited by persons of a lewd, vulgar, depraved character. But on the astral subplane, this repulsive nature is magnified many times. He recounts the writings of ancient Egyptians from 4,000 years ago on the state of this realm. What manner of foul region is this into which I have foolishly come? It is without water, without air, unfathomably deep. It has the darkness of the blackest night, when the sky is overcast with dense clouds, and no ray of light penetrates their curtain. Souls wander hopelessly and helplessly about herein. It is in there is no peace, calm, no rest, no quiet of the heart or mind. It is an abomination and desolation. Woe is the soul that abideth herein. Countless human forms, almost beast-like and repulsive, can be seen dwelling here, though there are even lower forms that exist on an even lower subplane. These creatures are disembodied souls who descended to this lower plane when they awakened from their brief astral sleep. The material world of Earth appears as a kind of shadowy background. The creatures who exist here can see all of the places of debauchery in that world of material desires that they were once attached to and part of, but they are prohibited from participating in them. They are, in fact, caught in a kind of veritable hell, for they are constantly tantalized and tormented by their inability to participate. They can exercise only what Atkinson calls the lust of the eye. They can see their kind in the flesh eating, drinking, gambling, and participating in debauchery, and while they eagerly cluster around, cannot make their presence felt. The lack of a physical body is indeed a hell to them. Occasionally they can influence some human still in the flesh, who's saturated with liquor or drugs, to physically open him or herself to possession. Some of these few souls sink so low they are incapable of rising, and after they meet the final fate, not of damnation, but of annihilation. However, they are not punished for their sins, but by them. Atkinson notes, however, that even the lowest souls mostly rise in time. He says on the various higher planes of the astral, the traveler encounters beautiful mountains and valleys, rivers and lakes, cities, towns and villages, even buildings of all kinds. These are built from the astral substance by means of the imaginative minds of the dwellers of these planes. To the visitor they seem unreal and appear almost as transparent crystal, but to the dwellers on the astral they are as solid and real as their material counterparts. On these planes the dwellers appear to be busy even when their tasks are those of sport and play. Atkinson says that the key to the occupation and pursuits of the dwellers on the astral is found in the principle that the life of the soul on the higher divisions consists of a working out of the intellectual desires and ordinary tendencies, tastes, likes, and aspirations that they were unable to manifest fully in earthly life. There is in evidence a living out or wearing out of the old desires to make room for higher ones. All tend toward spiritual evolution. In this work on the astral, there is an actual mental advance and progress. Life on the astral is very intense, and the vibrations are much higher than on the material plane. The astral is one of the universe's great workshops and laboratories of the soul. On even higher planes of the astral, all forms of religion, high and low, Oriental, Occidental, ancient and modern, are represented. Each has its own abode. On the highest subplanes of the astral are regions inhabited by philosophers, scientists, metaphysicians, and higher theologians, those who have used their intellectual power to solve what Atkinson terms the riddle of the universe and to peer behind the veil. There are also highly evolved beings who were once human, who voluntarily returned from even higher spheres to teach and instruct. Atkinson calls these elder brothers of the race. Their goal is to support those who are struggling on the path. Atkinson concludes this book with the following advice. Use this manual as a key to unlock many mysteries, not as a book to while away an idle hour. Do not have any idle hours. Do not try to kill time. Be an earnest, thoughtful occultist, ever unfolding and evolving as you progress along the path. Look forward, not backward. Look upward, not downward. Have faith, not fear. For within your soul is a spark of the divine flame which cannot be extinguished. See you next time.